Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. That's not what we're going to be focused on today. I'm going to do another story time, and this story time is going to pick up where that last story time left off, and we're going to talk about the year I nearly quit graduate school. And that was the third year. And I was in a 5-year program, and for most programs like the one I was in, which was the Doctorate of Psychology program or PsyD program, that third year is pivotal for a lot of reasons. It's pivotal because it's the last year that you get practicum placement before you go to internship, and the practicum placement sets you up for where your internship is going to be, and that internship sets you up for where your postdoc is going to be. If anybody ever tells you differently, that it doesn't matter what your practicum placement is or your internship, please do not believe them. There were a lot of professors and people and advisors in my program that would frequently say that, but it does matter. So plan appropriately. And I did not listen, and I planned appropriately. Internship was a little different though. But that third year was also pivotal because we had to take what was called the comprehensive exam. And this particular exam lasted for about a week, and we had to study for that exam for an entire month. It took a month for us to kind of take all of that information in. I'll get to why that was important towards the end. But the larger part of why third year was so difficult for me was because I was at an internship site with a supervisor that was immature and very unprofessional, and it was very challenging. And when I reached out for support, I didn't get that support in my program. So my internship year that year, or my practicum placement that year, was in a school setting, and I was doing school psych assessments. And the reason why I had to do that particular internship or practicum site for that year was because I was doing the school psych track, and because I wanted to work with children and families. So because of that, I had to do this third year in a school placement doing school psychological evaluations. And my previous year was at another assessment site, but it was at a private practice that also did school assessments as well as assessments in the private practice. So I had experience in that arena. Now, going into this, I knew this particular supervisor had a reputation for being brash, for being difficult, for being hard to work with. The last student that worked with her let me know that, she didn't really answer a lot of questions. You had to do the research on your own. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I can do that. That's not an issue. And I kind of like a challenge. So I signed up for this particular site because she was going to be a challenge. And I didn't know the challenge was less focus on academic or training growth and more on dealing with interpersonal issues. Now, I believe that we got off to a rocky start for multiple reasons, and the primary reason being that I was able to handle myself like a professional. And in a professional setting, when you're able to handle yourself like a professional, you're able to talk to anyone in any arena without sounding like a student or like you don't know what you're talking about. And it doesn't mean you don't need training. It just means that you are able to be a professional. And I was a professional before I started school. So there were 3 strikes against me before we had our biggest blow up. First strike was she would have these weekly meetings, and these weekly meetings would be with other school psychologists where they would sit down and look at individual assessments. And while they were looking at assessments, they would kind of decide how to score these assessments, especially when there was some gray area on how you would score the assessments, and just get consensus on scoring these assessments. First strike against me was me attending this one meeting with other school psych professionals and psychologists, and I think we were working on a vocabulary part of the assessment. And in that particular vocabulary part, I gave my reasoning as to why I thought it should be scored this. She disagreed with me. Problem was, her colleagues agreed with my assessment and not hers. So that was strike 1 against me. Strike 2 was there was a crisis at one of the schools that she worked with. It wasn't a school that I worked at, but it was a school that had a crisis on the day that I was working with her. I worked with her Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I believe, if I remember correctly. So this was one of the days that I was actually at this site for practicum placement, or they called it internship. So they had a crisis that we needed to go there and deal with. And when we got there, she kind of walked around, didn't give me any indication on what I needed to do while I was there. But because my first year had a similar situation where there was a crisis in the entire school, because the DARE program decided to show real live photos of people who had overdosed on drugs, and unfortunately some of those photos had family members in it of some of the students in the school. So we had to deal with a crisis in that space for my first year. So dealing with the crisis in a school setting with kids, dealing with grief and anything else, I had already dealt with. So when I went into it, I felt somewhat prepared because I had to do it before. So when I went into one of the classrooms, it was another school counselor in there with me, and we started talking to the children about how do you deal with grief, what might grief look like, started talking about how they felt about the student and what was happening with the student. And then we started to play some games just to get their minds off of what was going on in that moment, to try to get them to start to talk a little bit and feel a little bit more comfortable. If you've ever worked with children, this is why play therapy is so effective. It's because children are more apt to engage in conversations with adults when they're not focused on just primarily the conversation. They are more apt to have a conversation with you if they're playing or doing something else while they are actually having a conversation with you. They feel more comfortable. So this is why we started to play some games and we started to talk. Well, towards the end, one young lady wanted to talk one-on-one. She had some things she still needs to process and talk through. She was dealing with grief outside of what was happening in the school that she wanted to talk about, and she wanted to sit and talk with me. So my supervisor was ready to go. She had done whatever it was she had come to do, so she was about to leave. So I asked her if I could stay with the student until the student was ready to go back to class, and she'd come back and pick me up. She was like, fine, she'll do that. Now I did that, and I stayed, and once the student was ready to go back to class, I met with the school counselors to kind of talk through what had happened and to give her a call to come and pick me up. Well, one of the counselors said to me, how long have you been doing this? I mean, you were really good at what you were doing. And I was like, I'm still in training. This is my third year. I haven't been doing this for a really long time at all. He was like, well, tell your supervisor that you did a really great job. I mean, I think you're going to do well in this type of program and in psychology. I was like, thank you. I appreciate it. Me being the humble person that I am, I never told my supervisor, but I feel like that got back to her, and I think that was strike 2 for me. Strike 3 for me was she was working at another school. And one day we went to the school and the kid was having a crisis, and she had a working relationship at the school. And we both walked into the school, and I was standing right beside her, and the principal looked at me and said, is there any way you can help with this child? I was kind of thrown off because I'm like, I am still in training. I don't even know what to do right now. What I said to her was like, I'm still in training. This is my supervisor. She may be able to help more. And that was coming from a place where I'm like, you have a working relationship with these children. You've been in the school system for a long time, so you may know better what to do than I do. I'm not sure why this principal is asking me over you when you have a working relationship with her, but that's what it was. So I feel like that was strike 3. And that point forward, we had a lot of disagreements. We really couldn't see eye to eye, and we had a lot of different confrontational moments while we were in the school. One time I was working on a report. She changed the wording of the report. She asked me if I understood or if I saw any difference on how she changed the wording. I said no. She had a tendency. She was one of those people that would ask things multiple times, the same question multiple times, because she had in her mind what she thought the answer was. But instead of her telling you what her thoughts were, she would just keep asking you the same questions in hopes that you will eventually get to a place where you say whatever it is that she was looking for you to say. This irritates me because 1, I don't like repeating myself. 2, I don't lie to adults because I don't have a reason to lie to adults. So this was not something I'm getting paid for. I have absolutely no reason to lie to you. So if you ask me something, I'm going to give you the honest truth. And she would keep asking me the same thing, and I don't like repeating myself. So in any situation, if you ask me something twice, the second time you ask me, more than likely I'm going to tell you, you might want to write this down, because the third time I might not answer the question. Because if it's that important that you have to ask me multiple times, I feel like you should do what you need to do in order to save that answer somewhere, because it must be important for you if you're going to keep asking me about it. So she would do that. But it wasn't that she wasn't getting the information, it was that she was looking for a specific answer. And it wasn't until probably about the fourth time of her asking me a question that I said, like, look, you've asked me this question about 5 times now. Like, what is it that you're looking for that I am not telling you? So either I'm not understanding the question, or you're looking for something else. And it took me saying that for her to say, oh, well, I thought this is why you were doing this, so this is why I was asking you. And I was like, okay, so well, no, that's not why I was doing that. But okay, cool. She would do that frequently, and that would irritate my soul, because I'm like, I am answering your question, so what is it that you're looking for? You keep asking me the same question, and it's going absolutely nowhere. So one time, because she had a problem with boundaries, and she always liked to push boundaries, and she liked to get you to do things that she wanted you to do simply because she felt like she could. So she asked me to do a report over the weekend one time, and that weekend I got sick, and I also forgot to take the book home that I needed to write the report, so I didn't do the report. So I started working on it that Monday when I got in, and then she was like, so why didn't you do this over the weekend? I explained to her that I got sick, and I also left the book. She was like, well, you left the book, so you weren't planning on doing it to begin with. I was like, okay. So she just kept asking me, so why didn't you do it? And when did you get sick? And blah, blah, blah. And every time she would ask me, when I start to answer the question, she would cut me off and start talking again. So at one point, she was like, so why didn't you do the report? I didn't say anything. She asked me again. I didn't say anything. She said, are you going to answer me? I said, if you allow me to speak without interrupting me, I will answer you. So when she did, I told her the same answer that had been given her when she asked me the questions 4 times before that. It didn't change. I was sick. I forgot the book. Nothing else. She's like, you weren't planning on doing the report, so I'm just going to leave it at that. I was like, okay, cool. We got past that incident. Final straw. Bigger blow up happened in December. So this is from, I think we started practicum in either July or August. So this is from July. The stuff that I've talked about now was from July to probably November. So in December, I am writing this report for a first grader. And she wants me to diagnose this first grader with emotional disturbance. That did not sit well in my soul, because the idea of diagnosing someone who's in the first grade with the label of emotionally disturbed didn't really sit well to me, and I didn't really understand the diagnosis as far as the IDEA is considered when it comes to school psychology. And neither her nor the internship director could help me understand, like, what did emotionally disturbed mean as it relates to children in a school setting. Now, this is what I deduced from researching and from my understanding of school psych. Now, this is going to be a side note. Fast forward past this part, I'm going to talk about school psych and IDEA. So most school psychologists, until more recently, they were master level providers. So they weren't true psychologists, which means they hadn't gone through a doctorate level program to be a psychologist, but they called them school psychologists because that's what they would do. They would do school psych assessments, but they didn't have the ability to kind of diagnose any type of mood dysregulation disorder. So they couldn't diagnose something like anxiety or depression or post-traumatic stress disorder or acute stress disorder. Those are things that they couldn't diagnose in children. So emotional disturbance is like a catch-all for any type of mood concern. Now, this is my understanding. Any school psych person or school psychologist out there, please feel free to comment below and tell me if I'm right or wrong. But that's what I deduce from understanding what emotional disturbance, or having the diagnosis of emotional disturbance, is for a child in a school system. Because outside, when you're working in the school system, the IDEA has different diagnoses related to like school issues or school disorders that most school psychologists can diagnose, like learning disabilities or ADHD. In some cases, that's one of those gray areas as well, as to whether a school psychologist can diagnose a child with ADHD in a school system. In most cases, I don't think they're able to, but in some cases, especially if it's a doctorate level psychologist, then they may be able to. And some people still don't, so there's still a gray area. But either way, emotional disturbance wasn't sitting well with me. So she wanted me to write up why I thought the diagnosis was one thing and why I thought the diagnosis could fit as emotionally disturbed. So she wanted me to kind of iron that out. So I didn't write it down because as a professional, I know how to do research and I don't actually have to write it down and I can still speak to it. Didn't know she wanted me to write it down completely, but she did. Later on, I figured out that she did want me to write it down. So we set up a meeting to go and meet in a public space, and we met at a Whole Foods. Every other meeting to that point had happened at the school, in her office. This was the only time we ever met in a public place. So in December, we met in the public place to have a conversation about this diagnosis, and we were having a conversation, and we were talking about, like, I was explaining to her why I want to give the diagnosis of this and why I thought emotionally disturbed might fit or might not fit, and it wasn't in writing. So she says to me in this public place, she says to me, and she also takes her finger and she does this to me, and she says, I know it's in here, but I want it in here. And she was pointing at my laptop. And in that moment, it sent something through my soul and through my spirit and through my body, and everything in me wanted to punch this lady in the face. But being the professional that I am and the adult that I am, I had to take like a couple of deep breaths before I lost my composure. But it had pissed me off. It pissed me off to no end. And I didn't see red. I saw like a light pink. It didn't get red. It was a light pink though. But I didn't realize how pissed off I was until I got up and I wondered how many people had seen this white lady admonish me in this setting as if I were her child. And that pissed me off even more. So because I was mad and because I was just pissed off, I left that meeting, wrote the report, sent it to her. She sent me an email over the Christmas break because, again, like I said, she has no boundaries. So she sent me an email over the Christmas break to tell me all of the assumptions she had made as to why I had written something in the report or said something or done something. So her email, she had a tendency to be rude or brash. But this email felt a little bit more harsh. And I didn't know if I was being too sensitive because I was already pissed off with her, or if it was really as harsh or rude as it sounded to me. So being the professional that I am, I sent the email to my internship director and I said, can you take a look at this email and let me know if I'm being too sensitive in this moment because me and her are having some concerns, or if this is just who she is and this is just her being who she is. I'm just trying to figure out if I'm reading more into this than I need to. And I said, I don't need you to actually speak with her. I don't need you to go to her at all. I just need to make sure I'm not being too sensitive. She did the exact opposite of what I asked her to do. And she went to her. And the reason how I know she went to her is because this immature supervisor, being who she was, decided to send me an email after my internship director went to her and said, her email to me was, I've already spoken to Mary about the issues that we're having. So you can figure out how to write this report however you need to. And that was the end of the email. And I was like, okay, so now I have to deal with this. Now, before I left, she let me know if I completed this report, then I didn't need to come in until the Wednesday of that following week after the Christmas break. Not the Monday, but the Wednesday. So when I got there on Wednesday, she wasn't there. She was a bit passive aggressive as well. She wasn't there. So when I texted her and I was like, are you coming in today? She was like, well, I didn't think you would be here because I was expecting you to be here on Monday. So I texted her back and said, well, we had made the agreement that if I sent you the report before December that I could come in on Wednesday instead of Monday because I was going out of town. She responded, well, I've never made that agreement with anyone, so I know I didn't make that agreement with you. Side note, when you're dealing with someone who's immature and petty in a professional setting, please make sure that you always get everything in writing. Because if it's just verbalized, they will almost always pretend like they have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. So after she says this, I send her the text exchange that we had that outlined her saying, if you finish this report, you can come in Wednesday instead of Monday. I don't even think she responded after that. I was like, cool, you're not coming in. I'll see you Friday. Well, I don't even know if I stayed that day or left. So I reached out to my internship director, and I already had a meeting set up to meet with the internship director. When I met with the internship director, I was like, before we even start, I'm pretty sure she reached out to you on Monday and said I didn't show up for internship. She was like, yeah, she had already reached out to me. I said, I wanted to let you know that that was already planned beforehand, and she was okay with it. She forgot. I let her know yesterday, and I'll send here's the email for you to see. Here's the text exchange for you to see as well. She was like, okay, well, thank you for bringing that to me. So the internship director then proceeds to ask me what's going on. So I explained to her, like, one of the things that we are having a difficult time with is her repeating herself, like her continuously asking me the same question, because she's made an assumption as to why I'm doing things instead of her actually just talking to me about what needs to be done or what her assumptions are. After I explained this to my internship director looked at me and said, so what I hear you saying, classic psychologist wording, what I hear you saying is you feel like you already have done this and you know what you're doing, so you don't like to be questioned. I'm sitting there like, how did you get that out of what I said? I said, no, that's not what I'm saying. This is a training. So my expectation is that I'm going to be questioned. I don't mind people asking me questions. I don't like people asking me the same question that I've already answered over and over and over again. And then the internship director, because we started to kind of disagree, and because I am a professional, I know how to disagree without being disagreeable. I know how to handle a disagreement in a professional setting. She says to me, oh, well, you handled that better than I thought you would. And I was like, okay, so now I see. I have been labeled the angry black woman by the supervisor. And I think what pissed me off more about that than the supervisor making that assumption or trying to make it seem as if I'm this angry black woman, what pissed me off more is that this internship director, I had taken multiple classes with this woman, and the last time we were in class, I actually cried in her class, because that was the same year that Trump had got elected, and the next day we had class in her class, and we were talking through it, and I was so annoyed that I couldn't do anything but cry. So the fact that she would take this woman assessment of me as an angry black female as if I hadn't had any experiences with her or been in her class pissed me off more than this woman trying to make it seem like I was an angry black female. I was like, in that moment, I shut down, because I was like, I'm not going to get any help from this internship director, so I just need to figure out what I need to do moving forward. So she was like, well, do you want to continue to be in this process because you need it to do the school psych, the minor in school psych? And I was like, cool. I can have a conversation. She was like, you can have a conversation with her and y'all can decide if y'all want to move forward, and then we can go from there. She was like, do you want me to have the conversation, or are you able to have the conversation? And I was like, it's fine. I can have the conversation with her. So again, we met again in a public place, and I explained to her that her putting her hand in my face was very upsetting to me, and that can never happen again. And she gave me some reasoning as to why she felt like that was okay. Apparently, I think she said she'd done it. She does that to her friends or whatever. And this lady really did not understand boundaries, and she did not know how to conduct herself as a professional at all. So we decided to continue to work together. So she gave me another case to work on. It took me 2 weeks from start to finish to do this assessment. And when you do an assessment in a school setting, you have to do an observation, you have to get collateral from teachers, from parents, and you have to do the actual testing of the child before you are actually done with that assessment. I did all of that in the span of 2 weeks. So she also asked me to do this midterm evaluation, which was just this paper with 5 questions on it. I put some effort into it. Did not put a lot of effort into it to evaluate myself, because I knew she was going to have some stuff to say, and I just, whatever you got to say it. So she came in and she asked me to give her the midterm evaluation, and she looked at it. She got upset. She said, well, you didn't even try at all on this, and since you didn't try on this, we're done. I looked at her. I said, okay. She said, that's all you're going to say? You're just going to say okay? You're not going to fight for this? You're not going to fight for it? And I was looking at her. I said, When you start a conversation with "I'm done," it's not a lot of places to go from there. So I'm not really sure what you wanted me to say. We end up having a 2-hour conversation, and in this 2-hour conversation, I don't even know what we were talking about. I don't remember, but we ended with we both were done and we needed to go like our separate ways in this process. At the end of that 2-hour conversation, this is something I do recall saying to her or asking her. I said, "So since we're done, can you help me understand what is it that I could have done differently to kind of eliminate these things that we have been going through over this past 6 months?" Her response to me, it was, "What do you think you could have done differently?" I said, "Nothing." I was like, okay, I see now that there is nothing that was the issue. You had a personal issue with me and you made that a personal issue. She was also one of those ones she felt like I didn't want to learn from her because I didn't ask her a lot of questions. Can keep in mind, I was told at the beginning of this by the other student that she really didn't answer questions. So I didn't ask a lot of questions unless I really had a question to ask her. So I didn't ask a lot of questions because I was told that she didn't really answer questions. So I didn't ask them. But keep in mind, this is a lady that I also knew how she had met her husband, how she left her ex-husband, what school her child was in, when her child was coming home, what her child had majored in, her relationship with her husband, her relationship with her ex-husband, and everything else about her personal business. And again, never asked her about any of that either, but that's something she felt the need to share without me asking about it. This was the same supervisor. So we decided to go our separate ways, and I asked the internship director. One day I was just having some concerns about me being able to get internship placement based off this lady's assessment because I had the sneaky suspicion that this person has the ability to be vindictive or petty or childish, which she had demonstrated on several occasions. So the internship director says to me, "Well, I've known her for 20 years. I don't think she would do anything like that." I was like, if you had a working relationship with this person for 20 years, why did you not take yourself out of this situation? Because you did not have the ability to not be biased in this situation, considering you've had a 20-year relationship with this woman. And I'd also asked the internship director, because she had that relationship, what did she think I could have done differently to kind of change the situation? And she let me know that she didn't know. That she didn't think it would be anything, which lets me know that this was personal. Again, internship director is also someone who likes to teach people how to be professional. She lacks the ability to be professional herself because there were several times that she needed to not be a part of a certain educational stance because of the duality or the dual nature of the relationship she had with the students, that she found a way to make it okay for her to be in these arenas. And one of them was for her to sit on my final clinical orals team. She was one of the members on my clinical orals, even though we had an existing kind of conflictual relationship and she was aware of it. She didn't feel the need to kind of step away because of a bias. She had a really hard time, and she probably still has a really hard time seeing her own biases in situations. So that was the end of that situation. And my internship director, I feel like she kind of purposely tried to make it hard for me because one of my classmates let me know that their supervisor needed help and he was willing to take me on as a trainee in the program. And I told my internship director this, and she was like, "Well, we have to go through this process and that process before you're able to just start somewhere else." She delayed the process long enough that I couldn't go and work for the other school. And so it kind of put my ability to have the minor in school psych in jeopardy, which affected my internship placements. But again, one monkey don't stop no show. So I still ended up where I needed to end up as far as being a psychologist. Things worked out however they needed to work out. And I'm grateful for where I am right now because I'm getting a lot of things done that I don't know if I would have gotten done if I would have taken the route that I wanted to take. The route still isn't impossible, still something I can work towards. But that was a pivotal part. That year of straight BS was a part of it. But also that comprehensive exam that I told you about earlier that I had to study for a month and had to take a week-long exam. Most of these exams were graded subjectively because they were like essay questions where you were giving a patient a profile of a patient, and you're supposed to identify how you would treat them, what the diagnosis would be, blah 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 blah, or give an explanation of what your idea of neuropsych information was. And it was all of the grading was going to be subjective based off what professors thought you how well the professors thought you answered the questions. Only one part of that test wasn't subjective, which was stats. And stats is just math, so I had no concerns about that. Now, this comprehensive exam was kind of like a pass-fail or pass conditional fail. It was a pass-fail. So either you passed it or you failed it. And if you failed the exam, you had the ability to retake it. This made me nervous because up until that point, any subjective test that I'd taken at this school, I'd gotten a conditional pass. It was never a straight pass. It was always, they either felt like I needed to go to the writing center, or they felt like, I actually had a professor tell me first year that my answer was so simple to one of her essay questions that she didn't think I understood the material. So when I followed that up with, but did the answer the question? She said yes. However, because this is a moving target when you're dealing with certain people, she says, however, when I have essay questions that's worth, let's say, 5 points, when I have essay questions that's worth 5 points, then I'm looking for 5 sentences to that essay question. I was like, I could argue the point that wasn't established beforehand, but it's like trying to nail down Jell-O. It was going to keep moving. I was like, whatever, I'll take whatever grade I have right now and keep moving. This is first year. I'm dealing with this in first year. Cool. My answer is so simple that you feel like I don't know the material. Although I thought simplification meant you had a greater level of the material, that you can simplify it. Not too simple, but simplified enough that you show that you know what you're talking about. If you wanted me to regurgitate what was from the book, then I could do that as well. So that had been my experience up until then on subjective tests. So this comprehensive exam made me nervous because about 5 out of the 6 parts of this exam were subjectively graded. Guess who passed every part of this exam and didn't need to have to go to the writing center, didn't need to have to further explain herself, didn't have to, give clarifications to anything. But guess what made this test different from every other test that I've taken at that school? This particular comprehensive exam was turned in anonymously. So professors did not know whose paper they were grading. And it's amazing that when no one knows that I've done the work, no one questions whether I understand the work or not. No one questions my writing ability. That was another kick in the face for third year for me, because it's like up until that point, every subjective exam I'd taken, someone either said, you have poor writing skills, you may need to go to the writing center, or I don't know if I fully understand your answer on this. And I'm like, it's amazing that people can understand when they don't know that it's coming from me. So third year moving forward, my fourth year, my fifth year, I shut down. I stopped participating in class. I stopped doing anything extra. I did more for my business program or my business degree than I did for this doctorate that I had. I did the bare minimum I needed to do to, 1, make an A in the class, and 2, get out of this program. I stopped caring. I stopped caring to the point that your 5th year you have what's called an orals exam. And you sit in front of a board of about 3 professors. Again, one of the professors, actually the head of my board, the head of my committee for my orals, also was the internship director that didn't know how to excuse herself when she had an existing problematic relationship with students, was on my committee. She was the head. And I could have fought to get her off, but one of my roommates had fought to get her off of her committee And this roommate had the worst orals experience, and she had to jump through a lot of hoops to pass that process. So it's like, I'm gonna put the amount of effort I need to put into this to not make myself feel crappy at the end of it. So what that looked like is that orals requires for you to do a write-up on a therapy case and an assessment case. And I had classmates who worked on that presentation or that report for months. I think I worked on it for 2 weeks, maybe over 2 weekends. That's the amount of effort I put into it. And I ran it through the free Grammarly in order for me to do a spell check and do proofreading on it. And that was it. And I got what I thought I was going to get, which was a conditional pass, which I knew I was going to get that regardless of what I wrote, regardless of what I did, because this woman felt like she needed to teach me something all the time. So I got a conditional pass, and they said I was surprised by the amount of grammatical errors and spelling errors that was in my report. So I needed to fix that, and she wanted me to kind of write up how ADHD and anxiety can be dually diagnosed in a school setting as an actual psychologist. Did that. What I did was I signed up for the paid subscription for Grammarly, which was a 7-day free trial. I used that 7-day free trial to run both of those documents through again, and whatever changes it said I needed to make, I made, and that's what I turned in. And when I went to see her to talk about what I needed to do to pass, she was like, well, I mean, the write-up is about 40% better. You have about 40% of things that you still may need to fix, but we'll go ahead and pass you. I was like, okay, cool. So that's the year I almost, third year was the year that I almost said, screw this, I'm done. I don't want to do this no more. But thank God I had friends and family members that was like, Heffa, you done put 3 years into this and a couple tens of thousands into this program. You got past this part, keep going. And suck it up, buttercup, and figure out what you need to do to make it through these next 2 years to get this done. And I did just that. Figured out what I put my head down, figured out what I need to do these next 2 years to get out, and I stopped engaging. I stopped trying in that program because it was killing me to put forth effort and to have people tell you that your effort isn't good enough. Not because your effort wasn't good enough, but because they couldn't see their own biases. And I don't know where this internship supervisor is. I'm pretty sure she's still supervising students. She had a reputation for making students cry. I'm a grown woman. I'm not crying. You don't pay me. I didn't learn anything while I was with her. I wasn't getting paid for this. I have absolutely no reason to cry about this process. So I'm almost certain she's still doing supervision for students. Hopefully they are making it through the program. I know my 5th year, she had another black student, and that student wanted to talk to me about her. And hopefully I helped this other black student that had to deal with her. If I hadn't said earlier, this was a white lady. My internship director was also a white lady. I hoped I helped that one student to get through the year that she needed to get through with her. My internship director is still at the school. She was even promoted. And there was a complaint against her with the school. Not my complaint, but somebody else had. And we see how far that went. And it's one of those things, and I know somebody's probably saying, why don't you talk to your classmates about it? Why don't you talk to your advisor about it? I talked to my advisor. My advisor, unfortunately, wasn't helpful at all. And I think he wasn't helpful because he felt outnumbered by the amount of women in the department. So he felt like his voice didn't matter. I think he tried to speak up, or at least he said he did. I don't know if he did or he didn't, but I just felt like I was not supported. I didn't tell my classmates because 90% of my classmates were white, either white men or white women. And they love this particular professor. So it's one of those things that if it's not happening to you, I knew that I would get from them, like, it's not as bad as you think. Maybe she was trying to do this or this, so they try to downplay what I'm experiencing because they had never experienced it, and they probably actually liked her as a professor and as one of the trainers as well. So I didn't actually want to make any waves because I knew I wasn't going to get the support. And I made it through that year. I made it through 4th year, I made it through 5th year, and I graduated. And I'm out of the program, and I'm a psychologist. And I take nothing from that experience except to know that you're going to always deal with some difficult people in different situations. And you get to decide whether you want to let them stop you from reaching your goal, or you want to keep going and figure out what you need to do to get to where you're going to get to. Because you're not going to change them from being the buttholes that they are, but you get to decide whether you're going to let them stop you from being who you want to be. And neither one of those people were going to stop me from getting to where I wanted to be. I put too much money and too much time in that process. So yeah, no, wasn't going to happen. So that was the year I almost quit graduate school. But I made it. I made it out. I'm a doctor now. I'm a psychologist now. I rarely call myself a doctor, but I'm a psychologist now. And yeah, it was par for the course. So what I hope you take from this today and listening to this today is that you are going to deal with some difficult people in this process. I don't even care if you are in a program that's actually supposed to be focused on wellness and knowing your biases and understanding mental health. You are going to run into some difficult people who are actively trying to make life hard for you. And you have to decide if you want to give them that power or not. And I don't give people that power in my life. I don't give people that control in my life, because what you won't do, there's always someone above you. And there's always a way to get around difficult people. You may not always see the solutions firsthand, but I'm sure there is a solution that you may not be seeing. Just take some time to try to figure out what those solutions are, but keep pushing forward and know that there may be a way to get around it. And if there isn't a way to get around it, you have to figure out how to get through it or fight against that system so no one else has to experience that. The system was too large for me to fight, and I didn't care enough to fight that. So that's my story. Hopefully you've been entertained. No, I wasn't hurt by the process. It was annoying, but I survived. I thank you as always for taking the time to listen. Jot down any thoughts, questions, comments you have below, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.